All right, good. Y'all can hear me good in the back? Okay. Okay. So, still on the topic of suffering, right? Um, so now, of course, completely different perspective we're going to see, right? With Maimonides, very different from the book of Job. Maimonides, of course, is influenced by Greek thought, which is why he's kind of moving away, right, from the Hebrew way of thinking, which is much more um, confrontational, we'll say, right? So I think I mentioned in the introduction, right, how Maimonides himself went through a lot of chaos in his life. I learned this recently that his wife actually died very young, and then he was supported by his younger, or I think it was, I don't know if it was younger or older brother, but his brother was supporting him financially. His brother died in a what do you call it, a shipwreck, right? So he went, and of course the whole history of the persecution, exile, right? As you saw in the introduction, right? So he's somebody who has firsthand experience with suffering, but he has a very Greek approach, right? For Maimonides, right? I'm going to summarize a little bit his thought in general, then we'll get into the text today. But for Maimonides, his belief is a very Aristotelian belief, right? That suffering is not coming from God. So very different from the book of Job, where we saw that God is kind of behind everything, pulling all the strings, right? For Maimonides, suffering doesn't come from God. This is the Aristotelian view. He has the same cosmology as Aristotle. He has the same worldview as Aristotle. Aristotle believed that God created the world and then just with the laws of the universe and then left it to its own devices. So whatever is going on here is really our fault. And in fact, this is actually a really good way to see this, because a lot of us struggle with the problem of suffering. One of my students, I think in this class, mentioned in their essay how, they still couldn't come to terms with the fact that there's so much suffering, like, premature babies and like, car crashes and, horrible things happening still, right? It's not just, so for them, suffering, we saw with Job, suffering forms us, makes us grow, but she's saying, well, how does it help anyone grow if you have a premature baby dies, right? Nobody's growing through this. Baby's dying. Right? There's no growth for the baby, right? So, or for Job's children, for that matter, right? So, one way to understand this kind of massive, colossal suffering we go through is really that a lot of I think, honestly, 99.9% of our suffering could be resolved if human beings got together and thought through things, right? Even the premature baby. Right? If we funded science, right? If we stopped funding war, right? If we had proper funding in the sciences, we would probably go and deal with most of the sicknesses and the world's ills, right? If there was not an addiction problem, maybe with alcohol or drugs, we would have less accidents on the road, right? So many of the ills that befall us are really us, right? If you think about it. Or us not using the resources we have wisely, right? Not funding science, or not, dealing with the massive addictions that we have, which make us incapable of functioning on the road, right? So this is one way to see it, which I think is very healthy, that actually, if you think hard, a lot of our ills could be resolved by us if we put our mind to it, right? We don't need God is not up there, So the view of Aristotle is actually quite healthy, that here's the world, this is our world. And we have made it like this, right? We have caused this plight where we are in right now, and we can get out, right? This is, I think, also Aristotle's view. If we train our reason, if we become moral individuals, we can really get out of this wretchedness that we have created for ourselves, right? So that's the Aristotelian view. God creates, leaves, and then here we are, and we are the regents, right? We are the ones in control. Now, Maimonides is going to be a little bit more Jewish than Aristotle, right? He's going to add something. He's going to say, nevertheless, right? Yes, we are in charge. Yes, we have reason. Yes, we can do this. We can still, to a certain degree, attract divine providence, right? So let me say that again, because that is an important point, right? Even though, yes, we are left to our own devices, God is absent, the most suffering coming from us, right? The way we have mishandled resources. This is the origin of suffering, the way we mishandle resources, right? But, says Maimonides, in addition to this, we still have the capacity as human beings to attract divine providence, right? Now, we'll have to see what that means, right? We'll find out that to attract divine providence doesn't mean to attract divine Santa Claus, right? Gifts. This is not where Maimonides is going. It's not about, okay, how can I, like Job, right? How can I attract God's blessings? How can I attract this car, this Lamborghini, right? How can I attract? This is different. Divine providence, we're going to see, is divine wisdom, divine light, right? So we're going to see that for Maimonides, the way out of suffering is to attract divine wisdom. And armed with this wisdom, we can begin to make proper decisions and move out of the suffering. So it's not God intervening and saving us, right? It's us saving ourselves by tapping into the divine wisdom or the divine light. That, for Maimonides, is the way out of suffering, right? So, of course, right, the question that is going to arise is, how do we attract this divine wisdom? How do we make ourselves a proper vessel for this divine wisdom? And we're going to see two things over the next couple days that we go over Maimonides. First, our vessel is often too small. Second, our vessel is often too cluttered. Okay, those are the two problems that our vessel, which is our reason, right, which is supposed to attract divine providence, divine wisdom, often too small and too cluttered. And so we have to go through a purification of the mind if we are to genuinely attract this divine wisdom and light, so that we can start to pull ourselves out of the suffering. Okay, that's in a nutshell everything. Any questions so far? Okay, great. So now let's get into now you have a broad view, right? Today we're going to talk about attracting divine providence, and next time we'll talk about the purification of the vessel, right? So that's the program. Okay, so let's get into our text. I'm on page 166. And I'm going to read in the second paragraph. I believe that. Everybody with me? Raise your hand if you're with me, if you have the text. Okay, great. All right. So here we have, right, he starts out with Aristotle, right? The world is, God is not in charge. God is not the origin of our suffering. So that's the first point, right? That's the first point he makes. God is not the origin of the suffering. We are. Or accidents, right? Something falls, a tree falls, although you can still even, imagine, right, there's a hurricane, you're walking in the street, a tree falls on you, you die, right? In a way, it's still human. There's still a human origin, right? We should have been attentive, warned the population that there is a hurricane, kept everyone at home, or built better roads without trees. I don't know. So there's still, even in accidents, you can still trace it back somewhere to human error, right? So I actually like very much this idea that we are really the origin of our suffering, and God, in a way, we have created this, right? God is not to be held responsible for something which is our responsibility, right? It's very easy to blame, instead of looking inwards to what is our role, right? Very often, most of us actually have had this thought that, how could us, right? Why are we always blaming, right? Why are we always projecting all of our failings on this, right, superhero supposed to help us? Why are we not looking within? Why aren't we questioning ourselves as to why there's so much suffering? Yes, Amoroso. What? Yes, absolutely, right? She's saying it's hard to grapple with it. It's hard to turn inwards, right? I mean, anytime you mess up in life, the first reaction is, he, she, they, my parents, my grandparents, my boyfriend, my girl, they did this to me, right? But actually, really what we should be doing is looking inwards, like, how did we cause the present chaos that we are in? And how can we begin to remedy it instead of just blaming a extraterrestrial for what is going on, right? So I think that's a very healthy starting point that Maimonides is taking, right? Yes?
I have a question. So, I'm a little confused because I thought this paragraph was talking about how everything that happens to animals and plants is random chance, but what happens to humans is because of God and divine intervention.
So yes, so there was two views in the ancient times, right? There was a Greek view that God is not at the origin of anything, and then there was a Muslim view, where God is at the origin of everything, right? So you had these two extreme views, right? The Greek view said God is not, we are the origin of everything, and then there was a philosophical school during the time of Maimonides, which was a Muslim, which because of course Maimonides lived during the golden age of Islam, as you know. And this school actually, and I think this is one of the basic tenets of Islam, that God is really, it's pure monotheism. Everything that happens, God in a way willed it, right? And so Maimonides is moving between these two. That's why you will see elements of both. But all in all, he's going to say, in a way, we are responsible, and yet we still have access to divine providence. So he's kind of the middle ground. So that's what you're reading in the text, the seeming contradiction. He's quoting the Muslim scholars, quoting Aristotle, and then fraying his own path, right? So, okay, so let's look. So, so then, right, I said, yes, this is the Aristotelian worldview. We are in charge, but we still have access to divine providence. Let's read what he says. Second paragraph, I believe that divine providence extends in this lower sublunar world, so sublunar, under the moon, right? Lunar is the moon, so it's a poetic way to, or Aristotelian way to talk about our Earth. Planet Earth is under the moon, sublunar world. It extends alone, only and alone to human individuals, right? So he's saying we are privileged in this world that we have access to divine providence. Now, anybody know why it is that we have access and not, for example, the plant outside or your pet? Why is it that only human beings have access? What is it that we have that plants and animals don't have, according to Maimonides and the Greeks in general? What's our specificity? What makes us so noble? What do we have that? Yes? Huh? Yes. Reason, right? We have, right, according to the Greeks, Maimonides, right, our animals, our plants certainly can feel. I'm not saying they're robots and, worthless. They can feel, they can sympathize, they can empathize. They cannot reason, right? We have this capacity to reason. Now, for Maimonides, reason is not a muscle where you're grinding out your own wisdom. Reason is a vessel. Okay, so make sure you write this down, that for Maimonides, reason is not your brain figuring things out by itself, right? Reason is actually shaped like a vessel. Reason is receptive. In fact, the Jewish word for intelligence, if we were to get a little mystical, bina, the Jewish word for intelligence means receptive intelligence, right? So intelligence is the ability to receive, the ability to be inspired, right? So for him, reason is a vessel supposed to receive a higher wisdom, right? He's not one of those... He's not like what we think nowadays, right? Where I'm sitting here and I'm figuring this out with my brain, right? No, anything actually that you do that is really creative, you've received that, right? According to Maimonides, you've been inspired, breathed through, right? So Maimonides believes we have this vessel, very precious vessel, where we can actually receive divine light, divine wisdom. It doesn't mean we're receiving a bunch of gifts and miracles. This is not what Maimonides means by divine providence. So make sure you clarify. Divine providence is not a bunch of miracles. It's not a bunch of favors. It's intelligence. It's wisdom. It's light, right? So he believes this, right? We all have this, right? And once we receive this divine light, we can begin to make proper decisions and start to move out of the dump that we have created for ourselves, right? Okay. So now it gets a little complicated. So I'm continuing here, because you might wonder and look around yourselves and be like, well, we all have reason, but some of us suffer more than others. Why? Right? If you look, right, you can look even in this class. Some of us have pretty stable lives. We make good decisions, and others is chaos, right? Or you can look in your family, right? Or your siblings or your friends. You can be like, I'm doing good, but look at... right? So how is it that even though we all have the same vessel, some of us suffer exponentially more than others? So he answers this question here. If you go to page, if I can find it. Okay, I'm going to look in my notes. 169. Page 169. Okay. Yes, go to the third paragraph. So now he's going to give us the key why some of us suffer more and what can we do about this, right? He says this. Go to the last line of the third paragraph. Therefore, providence. Are you with me? Okay. Therefore, he says, providence extends to everyone who is affected by this emanation to the extent that being is gifted with reason. In other words, some of us have more reason than others. We all have it, but some of us, the vessel is better. Some of us, the vessel is broader. Some of us, the vessel is purer. And that's why, according to Maimonides, right, he's saying here, to the extent that the being is gifted with reason, so to the proportion, if you have high reason, high divine providence, low reason, low divine providence. We all have it, but some of us have small, cluttered vessels, and others have large, pure vessels. And that's, depending on your vessel, is how much divine providence you will attract, right? So the key, of course, right, is, we're going to talk about this, how do we purify this vessel? But let's talk first about one little element that is very important to Maimonides, and here I'm going to be dealing more with the notion of expanding the vessel, right? There's an idea in Maimonides that it is not enough to be religious to attract divine providence. And this is a key point that I'm going to talk a little bit about. This is a general idea in Maimonides. If you're a religious person, if you love God, if you're pious, if you do everything right, like Job, right? Doesn't mean you're going to attract divine providence. That's not enough for Maimonides to attract divine providence. And I'm going to ask you in a second why. And you can see this, right? You can go to a mosque, a synagogue, or a church, and you can see a bunch of miserable people there whose lives are chaos. How? They're praying 5 times a day. They're praying, right? Right? They're going to church every Sunday. They're taking communion as often as they can. Some people are in church all week, right? And still their lives are chaotic. So what's happening? Why is it that being religious is not enough? Can anyone tell me what's the issue with religion? Why is it not enough for Maimonides to love God, to attract divine providence? Not enough. You can love God and have a wretched life. Why is that the case? Yes.
Well, like, there's no wisdom, blind faith. Like, if you're not actively seeking out like the truth of like your religion and you're just like following like a sheep, you're not going to gain anything from that.
Okay, right. You'd think that religion is a path to divine providence, to God, right? But if your mind is small, how much of God are you going to see, right? How much of God's will are you going to understand? Do you see what I'm saying? The problem with many of us who are religious, right, is that, yeah, we are religious, but our minds are small, so we see a small God, right? We see a small duty. We see a small path, right, where God is so much more, but we miss him because our mind has not been expanded wide enough to really capture, or not capture, it's a terrible word. So it hasn't been expanded enough to really apprehend God, right? And so for Maimonides, faith without reason can actually be very dangerous. And by the way, he was not the only one to talk like this. This is also a Muslim idea. A lot of Muslim scholars, Islamic scholars, talk about this notion that faith without reason is dangerous. Remember, the time that Maimonides is living is similar to our times. You had also terrorism, right? You had also, you saw with Maimonides, right? You had a kind of a balanced caliphate. You had a balanced political systems under Islam. And then there was this kind of invasion from North Africa, if you recall, of a very purist version of Islam, which did not tolerate anything else but itself, right? Which is very similar to some of the trends you can see also in the Middle East, right? So a lot of Muslim scholars were aware of the danger of having only faith, right? Without having a proper mind, without having a mind which is large enough. You can make God very small. You can make God into a mass murderer. You can make God into the origin of genocide, right? So both Jews and Muslims, interestingly, Christians weren't doing any of that because they were also problematic, right? But both Jewish and Muslim philosophers and theologians were reflecting at the time on the dangers of pure faith. When the person of faith does not have a wide enough mind, they will see a small God at the measure of themselves. They will then just see a God which is like them, murderous, vengeful, right, and so forth, right? So they were worried about that, and it was an issue at the time. There were strains within Islam which were violent and dangerous, although most, of course, of the caliphate was peaceful, right? But there were these moments. So what he's saying is really echoing a lot of the Muslim scholars of the time, where it's not enough to have faith. If you have only faith, you have a small mind, you only see a small God, right? Now, when you see a small God, it's actually a sin. It's a sin which is punishable by death in both Islam and Judaism. What is this sin where which corresponds to seeing a small God? It's an actual sin which is punishable by death, which is actually, when it boils down to it, this sin boils down to seeing a small God. What does it mean to make a small God? I'm helping you. Yes? Idol worship. What is an idol but a small God, right? So when we talk about idolatry in the Middle Ages, nobody had, little statues. When they talk about idolatry, they're talking about conceptual idolatry, the way that we make God small because our minds are small. That's the highest form of idolatry, right? There is the kind of, benign form of idolatry. You make little statues, you worship the statues, right? Both Judaism and Islam are allergic to this, right? But you also have conceptual idolatry, where your mind is making a small God to your measure. Yes, I am angry, resentful, and vengeful. So is God, right? And so God, in a way, becomes trapped in your conceptualization, in your narrow representations of him, because your mind is small. And so there is a huge danger now of keeping your mind small, is that you become guilty potentially of idolatry, right? Make sure you write this down. I'll come right to you, right? So this is so two dangers of keeping your mind small. Number one, you start to see God small, and you start to do potentially dangerous things with your distorted image of God, right? Number two, so that's a sin against people. Number two, you have a sin against God, because now you have made him small, right? And now everyone who is thinking of your God is thinking of a small, distorted God, right? So two dangers. Danger of being a threat to others because of your narrow view of God, and danger of idolatry, making God small. Okay, so that's why faith without reason is dangerous and sinful. We could say that. Amoroso. You're saying that the text shows a God as vengeful already. So let me see if I understood correctly, right? You're saying we don't even have to have a small mind. The text itself is showing a vengeful God. Is that what you're saying? Okay, very good question, right? Now, thank you. This brings me to a very interesting point, which was a practice, which was practiced both by Jews and Muslims at the time when they were doing exegesis, when they were reading the scripture. It's a practice which started in Islam. I think I mentioned it. Do I mention in the introduction the concept of ijtihad? No? I don't think so. Okay. So there was actually, in Muslim scholars of medieval times, the time of Maimonides, the awareness that to read the scripture and just follow it blindly without your mind is also dangerous, right? So they believe that we have to engage critically with scripture. If you just drink scripture as it is, you will be poisoned because scripture is full of craziness. And Muslim scholars actually acknowledge that the Quran could not be drunk as is. Even the Quran, right? Even though it's a holy book dictated by God, right? You still had to engage with it rationally. This has been lost, by the way. This practice is not so common anymore, right? That kind of Islam has been kind of forgotten by history. But there was a time where Muslim scholars believed that we have the duty to wrestle with the text. If the text says anything that goes against our common sense, our reason, our sense of humanity, we have the duty to interpret. Let me say that again, right? If there is anything in the text, so this is a Muslim concept, right, which Maimonides takes over. If there's anything in the text which goes against our reason, our common sense, our sense of humanity, right? If the text is saying, kill those infidels, right, for example, and you're like, I don't like that. I don't feel like that's the humane thing to do. You have a duty to interpret, and this is what they do, right? Muhammad does mention at times, kill those infidels over there, and scholars go and say, yes, but Muhammad at the time was dealing with this, dealing with that, and they were actually a foe, and this was actually, they were dangerous, and they needed to be fought, and so they interpret. They don't just say randomly, go kill any infidel. They say those particular people were a threat to Muhammad's tribe. They were actually coming onto him. He had to fight back. And this is when he said, kill the infidels, right? It's not kill the innocent infidels, right? So you see, so even Muslim scholars interpreting the Quran, which is supposed to be really pure, dictated by God, even they realize that book needs interpretation, historical contextualization, and then we can actually make some progress. And of course, the Jews had, and Maimonides also mentioned this, right? We need to grapple with the text. So when the text is saying, yes, the worldwide flood, let everybody, or when God tells the Hebrews, kill all the Canaanites, right? Interpretation is needed. So reason, not only to perceive God, but to perceive the text, right? And your reason has to be vast to really see the text correctly. That's the idea. So excellent question, right? So really, the idea is really to look upon spiritual things with a broad mind. If your mind is too narrow and you look at God or you look at scripture, you're going to see everything distorted. You're going to read that one passage in the Quran, kill the infidels, or read that one passage in the Hebrew Bible, kill all the Canaanites, right? And you're going to take up arms and go like an idiot, right? So he's saying, no, you need to have a broad mind so you can really understand what's happening and interpret and grapple with the historical context, and then you will understand more deeply what is happening, and you will then have a broader picture, and you will be therefore more in tune with God, who is broad, not narrow, right? God is broad. He cannot be approached narrowly, right? So, thank you. Does that answer your question? Yeah. So and learn this Arabic word, ijtihad. It's a great word. Ijtihad. This is this practice of wrestling with the text. So ijtihad, Ijtihad. And it should resemble another word which we all know because of the political context. What is that other word which it sounds like? Ijtihad sounds like what Arabic word that we know because of our political context. Anybody know? Yes? Jihad. It's the same root. And jihad means war, right? Struggle. So ijtihad is war with the text. For the sake of reason, you war with the text. You struggle with the text. You enter into conflict with the text. Like Job entered into conflict with God, right? This is all the Middle East. This is the personality, right? Conflict, right? Both Jews and Muslims constantly fighting over the text, right? Hopefully not killing people. So that's the idea, right? So ijtihad is a great, really great practice, which was very common in the Middle Ages and now a little less so, right? Very good. And it's still, of course, very much alive, supposedly, in the Jewish contexts, right? Should be. So that's the idea. So going back now. So we saw how faith without reason can be dangerous and idolatrous, right? And that's why for Maimonides, you cannot be truly religious if your mind is small, right? And this is very interesting. You cannot be truly religious if your mind has not been expanded, right? And I think next time, I wonder if we'll do that next time. No, I'll talk about it now. So anybody read through the text that that I assigned? How can we expand our mind? That's the question now. How do we do it? What does Maimonides propose to help us learn to expand our minds? Anybody remember? Yes. Yes, right? Maimonides, this is very powerful. I mean, I don't know if you measure what's happening here. Maimonides is basically saying, to be a good Jew, you have to be a good Greek, right? And by the way, Muslim scholars were saying the same thing. The greatest counterpart of Maimonides, Averroes, right, Ibn Rushd, said the same thing. To be a good Muslim, you have to be a good Aristotelian, right? That's the idea. In order to truly inhabit your faith, you have to have wandered outside of it. That's what is very powerful, which I believe is not taught about Maimonides, but it's there, that to dwell truly in your faith, you have to have the courage to wander outside of it. You have to learn Aristotle, the physics of Aristotle, the metaphysics. He was the only science at the time, so he's the main one. Physics, metaphysics. All of the texts on biology, right? You have to really master and then mathematics and other sciences. Once you have gone out and really expanded your mind through these sciences, you go back to the scripture and you're going to see clearly. That's the idea. So let me do a little experiment with you to help you apply this to your own lives. Let's see. Let's pick a topic that everyone hates. How many of you hate math? Let's try that one. Oh, wow. Okay. All right. How many of you hate chemistry? Okay. Anybody hate, let's see, what else is there to hate? Any other topics that are so loathsome? History, okay. And how many of you hate history? Okay. All right. Now, precisely this topic that you hate the most, Maimonides would say what about that? What? Yes, precisely that. Go and study. Why? Because your mind is narrow there. That's why you're suffering. And so you need to go and expand your mind there. The more you study math, the better you become at literature. Even though it's opposite, right? The more you study philosophy, the better you become at theology, right? The more you study a foreign language, the better you become at, I don't know, patriotism, right? So this is the idea, is that any of you, if you want to apply this, right? Any place where you feel like, I'm not comfortable in this topic, go there, because that will expand you and make you even better at what you're doing right now, which is your major, right? So yeah, so that would be one way to bring it home, right? So very important, right? Let's make sure, let me summarize briefly, right? That we all have reason, but some of us still suffer. Why? Because we don't have the same vessel. Now, we saw two problems with the vessel. Make sure you write this down. We're going to talk about the second problem next time. First problem, vessel is too narrow. That's what we talked about today. Second problem next time, vessel is too cluttered, right? But today we talked about the narrow vessel and how even if you love God and are religious, right? If your vessel is narrow, you're going to have a distorted view of God, a distorted view of Scripture, and a distorted view of how you should be godly. And that's why we have a bunch of people who think it's godly to kill, right? In all three monotheisms, by the way, they have made this mistake. Judaism, Islam, and Christianity, all three have made this mistake, even today, throughout history, that to be godly is to kill, right? Why? Because narrow mind applied to Scripture, narrow mind applied to God, and narrow mind thinking is doing God's will, right? So important, especially if we live in the same times. We're still in medieval times, right? In terms of the political situation. We have to understand the crucial importance to expand the mind, right? To really allow ourselves to explore other paths so that we can better inhabit our own path, right? Maimonides is not saying convert to another religion, leave Judaism, right? He's saying, no, to really be a good Jew, you have to have seen the world. And the same, right, goes in Islam. To be a good Muslim, you have to have seen the world, and a good Christian likewise, right? That's the idea. Okay, so now we get to the last part, last issue. Let's see if I have enough time, yes. Which is the issue of, there's still one more group of people which we do not understand their suffering. And this is a group of people which are both religious and rational. So they're both, I mean, they're amazing people, right? They have faith, they have reason, right? And yet they suffer. And now we have to see what Maimonides will say about that, right? And he's going to actually quote Job. We have a passage here about Job on page 172. So let's go there. Here we're going to go even deeper as to what divine providence really means, right? For now, we know divine providence is wisdom, so I can get out of my mess. But there is a deeper understanding of divine providence, and that's what we're going to figure out. Okay, so let's go to page 172. You see the 3 stars? That's where I want you to go. Tell me a little bit, based on this, read it now, go through it now. What is it that Job had to learn? According to Maimonides, he went through suffering for a reason. What was he supposed to learn through the suffering? What did he learn? Oh, Ahmed, go ahead.
He learned that all he knew of God beforehand was hearsay, and he was just talking about God, but then once he talked to God and developed that connection to God, was when.
Yes, good. And he talks about here in the text true happiness. What is it? What is true happiness according to Maimonides? Ahmed, do you want to try?
True happiness. I think he said that true happiness is when you know God. You know who He is.
Excellent. Right? Let's all go there, right? Ahmed is on the right path. Right? Let's read from after the 3 stars, right? This is why this opinion is attributed to Job. So this is Job complaining, right? Oh, sorry, yes? Yes, thank you. I'll finish and then I'll talk about the test. So, thank you. This is why this opinion is attributed to Job, so the complaining, right? However, he said these things as long as he was not in possession of true knowledge, but knew of God by hearsay, as most adherents of revealed religions do. However, as soon as he obtained reliable knowledge of God, which is what? He realized that true happiness, and this is the definition, which consists in knowing God, is in store for all those who know Him, and none of those afflictions can dull it. Now we have a very much deeper view of divine providence. Divine providence in this passage is simply resting in God, right? You know God, and when you know God, nothing can move you. He has a even more powerful passage here on page 193. So let's go there. Okay. Last sentence on 193. When a man, are you there? When a man, raise your hand, wave at me if you're there. Yes? No? 193. Okay, thank you. Last sentence of 193. When a man has achieved purity of thought, clear perception of God by the proper methods and beatitude, through that which he perceives, it will never be possible for evil of any kind to befall him. This is very powerful. He's saying basically when we have reached true knowledge of God, right, nothing can touch us. It is like we have an anchor in the storm, right? Your boat is on the water, is going like this, still going, everybody's boat's still going like this, but you have an anchor. All the other boats are crashing somewhere. You stay. Right? So he's talking here about something much more profound than just divine wisdom. This is a sense of the divine presence. Maimonides is very interesting because he oscillates between being rational and being mystical. I don't know if you noticed, but when I read this book, this is abridged, right? It's not the whole book. But when I prepared for the class, I read the whole book, which is a big thing like this. And I remember I was sitting in a bus, never take those buses, so-called 4 hours to Boston, right? Joke. I said 10 hours to Boston in one of these buses, right? It's like the bus from hell. After that, I told myself, I make money. I don't need to sit here in this bus. Anyways, so I was in this bus for 10 hours, right, to Boston. So I'm reading this text, and I'm realizing, oh my goodness, I'm reading, and it's pretty rigorous and analytic. And all of a sudden, when you read the text, you see like a garden, right? A beautiful courtyard, right? All of a sudden, and then he goes back to being rational and so forth. So Maimonides actually moves between very beautiful lyrical, mystical intuitions and then back to logic, Aristotle, and kind of debating with everybody around him. This is one of the mystical passages of Maimonides where he's basically saying divine providence boils down to simply anchoring oneself in the divine presence, resting in God, right? Once you have felt the embrace of the Most High, right? Once you have come to the point where you are resting in the embrace of God, nothing can touch you. So this is not even about solving problems. This is about simply dwelling in the presence, right? Or in the shadow of the Most High, to quote the psalm, right? Dwelling in the shadow of the Most High, nothing can touch you. You are in the right place, right? This is the highest level of divine providence. And this is why even some people who are very rational and so forth suffer, yet there's still a way out, which is to rest, right, in God. So that's the highest level, right, of coming out of the suffering. There's the low level where you don't come out, right, because your mind is too narrow. Better level where your mind is a little broader, you receive some insight, some light, some wisdom, but the highest level of navigating suffering is coming into the direct presence of God and resting, right, in the presence of God. And at that moment, really nothing can touch you, right? We're going to see more of this idea. And then he goes back to being rational, right? This was just a quick glimpse into the mystical Maimonides, right? But most of him is more rational. This last idea, we're going to see more of it when we do Rumi, of course, right? Who is a pure mystic, right? Okay, excellent. Any questions on anything I said? Clarification. Of course, you can stay after class if you want to go deeper always, right? Okay, so let's talk about your tests. Zoom people, please turn on your faces. I'm going to talk to a few of you. I'm going to go over those who are missing tests, wondering what's happening. So bear with me, all of you. I have to do this. Okay, Ali here? No. Barber, where's your test?
Hi, Professor.
Hi, Barber.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I mixed my dates up. You're getting it today.
Okay, very good.
Sorry about that.
All right, excellent. Chahal, is Chahal here? Chahal, I see you in there. Chahal, what's going on? Are you redoing it?
Yeah, I'm here.
You're redoing it, right? You have some time, I think we talked about.
Yeah.
Okay, good. Gavinovic, your test? Oh, okay, good. Hossein, is Hossein here? No. Hossein, are you there? Hossein, where's Hossein? Not nowhere. Okay, Jaskovska? I thought I saw you earlier. No more. Okay. Klidonas?
Yeah, I'm here.
Ah, where are you?
I don't have my camera on because I don't have a camera on this device.
Yes, your test.
But
Klidonas. Tell me.
I don't know what I got on my test. I didn't know how to check the grade.
Wait, did you submit it?
Yeah.
Okay,
I think.
can you resubmit? There's problems with the drive. Can you resubmit to the late papers? And
Okay, yeah.
okay, awesome. And probably your essay too, because I didn't get anything from you.
No, the essay I didn't submit, just
Okay.
a test.
Very good, very good. Who is not here? Oh, Peralta, that's you. Okay. Peralta, your test? You're going to, right? Okay, great. And the essay, yes. And what? You don't know you had a test? Yeah, it's true. I forgot to tell you guys in the class, right? I think check your announcements always, because that's how I'm like communicating, and there's a lot of information there. Okay, good. Saradakis, are you there? Yes. Saradakis, your test?
I emailed you about it. We had spoken. You just asked me to resubmit it as a PDF. I did that before the class, actually.
Thank you. Safin? Not there. Tejada? Today? Okay, very good. All right, so I wanted to know that. That's that. Okay, now, what I'm going to do in this class, so you know there's a supplemental instructor, right? Which normally is for 6 students, but I'm going to make her for the whole class. So here's going to be the policy. Whether you're sick or not, right? Who are sick here? Raise your hand. Okay, so this is whether you're sick or not. If you get below 11, you have to go to the next review session. Once you're back on a good grade, you don't have to go. Okay, so I think this includes the sick. So if you don't want to go, some of you are doing very well. I'm going to just don't go. I don't feel like forcing people who don't need these review sessions to go. But some of you need the review sessions, right, who are not sick students. So, of course, if you're a sick student, I mean, anyone can go to these review sessions. But if you have below 11 in your test, you have to go to the next review session, right? And then if you do good, then you don't have to go again. So anytime you're, may I read the names of those who have to go to the review session? Is that okay? Anybody have an objection to me publicizing? Objections, anybody? I'm open to objections. It's a French way. In France, we post all the names with the grades on public in the hallways. So I'm coming from that tradition, so I don't care. Okay, so people who need to go do the review session, please, that would be Biswas, where are you? Biswas, please. Chahal, potentially. I don't know what's going to happen. Epstein, are you there?
Yeah, but I emailed you and I resubmitted the test.
Yes, and you still need to go to the review session.
I don't have time to go to the review session.
I will not grade the test if you don't go to the review session. This is class policy.
When is the review session?
It's the Thursday before the test.
What time?
I think she will decide based on your availability. You can also do a private session if you can't make the full review session.
I have a very full schedule. I'm not sure I can make it.
I feel you. But until you get the average, I can't let you fall through the cracks. You understand, Epstein?
It had nothing to do with my understanding of the material. I had to do it with my misunderstanding of what you wanted from the test.
Yes, but even when you redid it, it was problematic. But let's talk after class. By the way, all of you, anyone who needs to talk about your test after class, you can come by. So Epstein will talk after class so you can get clarity on this.
Okay.
Let's see, Hassan, are you there, Hassan? Okay. Mota, is Mota there? Mota, I think you're in here. Mota,
Yeah.
okay, next review session, right, Mota? Pineda, likewise. And that's it for now. The rest, I don't know. I have to see your grades. Okay, so this will be the policy, right? As soon as you fall a little bit below and, you don't know what's going on, it's good for you to go to that session, get a good, when they do the heart thing, what are these, electroshock therapy? Yeah, and to get a little bit electroshock therapy, get the idea of what I want, right? The supplemental instructor took a lot of classes with me. She knows how I think, so she will tell you how to write this test. And then once you're back on track, it's good, right? Don't need to go back. Good. That's the next thing. And then, yes. All of you that I mentioned just now, please email the supplemental instructor right now to make yourselves available. Sharon.mejia, SHARON .MEJIA at qc.cuny.edu. So whoever I mentioned, please
Can
email.
you email the instructor?
Email the instructor and tell her I need a review session next time, just so she has your email. Some of you, I wasn't able to track your email down to send to her. So just email her right now. Okay, where was I? Yes, here's the main problem with the tests in general. Some of you also got lower grades than you could have had, even the ones who had above 11. You could have gotten A. Some of you simply missing some of the lectures, right? So you do really good on one question, right? Because you were at that lecture, and then you somehow missed one of the other lectures, or you didn't take adequate notes. So this is the issue. Before you take the test, make sure you've listened to all the lectures. They're all on YouTube. They're available. They're public. You can go and catch up and make sure you really listen to them, and then you do the test so you don't miss unnecessary points, right? There were a few of you who got 12 or 11, could have gotten 15 because you were missing elements from the lecture, right? Okay, so what we're going to do now, I'm going to stop the recording.